Naushin, sorry. We're recording? Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kwame Afray. I'm the chair of the Land Use Committee of Community Board 17. The date today is December 5th, and I call the Land Use Committee meeting for Community Board 17 to order. Just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed the time with your families. You seem to have very low activity out there. It's not a lot to report, but there's a few things that I just want to bring to your attention that was brought to mind. And hopefully we can spread the word out before we dive into the City of Yes modifications. The one thing that did come across my table was there been some solicitations for parapet inspections. Many of those thought it was suspicious. They were right. The city is enforcing some annual inspections for parapets. I guess due to the degradation of certain parapets not being maintained over time. The time for those inspections needs to be completed by December 31st of this year, but they don't need to be done by a licensed contractor like the solicitations indicate. It can be inspected by a superintendent, a handyman, and the idea is just to make sure that it's not leaning or cracking, which would then allow it to then fall to the street and injure people. So if you have been receiving these things or these solicitations for parapets, it's correct, and as in it does need to be inspected should you have one. If you don't know what a parapet is, you could contact me later or look up the definition on Google if that's not an option to you, and I'll explain to you what it looks like. Many homes have it with sloped roofs, so it's something to pay attention to. The second bit of news is reported at the meeting that the committee, on November 21st, the Committee for Zoning and Franchises voted in a modified revision of the City of Yes proposal. That distribution was sent out to everybody. You've been sitting with it, but sometimes the language could be a little difficult to understand. Subsequently, tonight, about 3 hours ago or so, the City Council voted for the City of Yes as well. I have the vote count as 31-20, which means it passed. And we have some details pertaining to that comes that will affect our district directly, and some incentives that we'll be speaking on a little bit later. But other than that, it's been relatively quiet. I haven't really heard anything or seen much. But I did want to share, in comparison to years past, I'm going to share my screen just so that you can observe. I did look up the amount of new buildings that have gone up in our district in the past year's time. The count is about 56. Second, gotta allow something here. About 56 buildings that went up. Seems like they're trying to bottleneck and throttleneck a few buildings before year's end, but it seems like I don't know, just gotta pick the right. Here we go. Share that. Can everybody see that?
It's coming up.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, we
Yeah.
see it.
This is the Department of Buildings BIS information system, right? Everybody can have access to it. You just type in Department of Buildings BIS. You would scroll down. I can show you, actually. Just for your knowledge, you can scroll down to over here, section 18, where it says the building type. I went to new buildings, and it actually allows you to search by community board. So we put the first of the month here and the year, slipping there, and then your list pops up, right? Tells you the areas and the permit filing dates for each new building, which is what I selected in our community board. It's 2 pages long, and compared to years prior, it is a lot less, which I guess is a good thing when you talk about the development and the developments to come once the City of Yes gets initiated and the ball starts to get rolling in that. So 56 New properties, if you're familiar with any of these streets, you probably noticed a few. Here's page 2. Right? So I'm just trying to and then you look at the dates when it was filed, you see that, have some concentrations in the fourth quarter. Basically, most of this last page is the fourth quarter, with the other pages being the previous 3. Right? So not as many new buildings going up in the district as of late, but we know what was passed, and, that's probably going to change in the coming time. All right? That ends my report. I see a hand raise. So I'm gonna, Ms. Bakruddin.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chair Frey.
Mhm.
So did you also check for modifications?
I could check for mods.
Okay,
Yeah,
because there are
I
quite a
look for
few
mods,
structures
yeah.
that increase FAR and increase height
Yeah, that would be an alteration. There's 3
alterations.
types.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. You would search that in alteration. There's 3 types of alterations, and then you would need to, then define the alteration you're looking for. Off the top of my head, I want to say it's 3.
3. Okay.
And if I was to filter the thing to
Okay.
3,
So
it looks
I'll go in and I'll check it out,
yeah,
because there
yeah,
are many more than 3 in
yeah,
Community Board
yeah.
17. So I think maybe
No, I understand.
I'll
There's
do a bit of a deep dive as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Thank you for
3
that.
types of alterations you can select. So there's
Oh,
a
okay.
alteration type 1, type 2, and type 3. And I
Okay.
think you're referencing a type 3, which
Type
I
3.
actually pulled up, and it looks like it's about 20 or so homes,
That makes sense.
right?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Right.
Okay.
And you could use it for really anything to search as these are active permits, things that are filed. So if you ever had something that you were curious about, if you wanted to try to narrow down finding information for a particular property and you're not too savvy on how to read the permits to get or pull the necessary information, you can use the business information system as a tool. They've tried to simplify it really in a simple way so that you could kind of jot in the necessary information to narrow down the search findings to get you where you need to be. All right. Cool. Any questions pertaining to the report?
Living room door.
Reviewing the room. I don't believe we have enough for quorum to vote on the minutes as yet. Need a few more, just a few more. Maybe I have to send a text out. I did the report already, and I'm going to move on to unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? Pennsylvania got 2 feet of snow. I mean, you're jinxing us. You're jinxing us, Ms. Bettis.
I
You're
hear
jinxing
you.
us. Just keep the bad news to yourself. I don't want to. I don't want to hear about bad news.
We're
It's a
talking about
hex.
white Christmas, so
Oh, no.
you gotta go to Pennsylvania. Not
Yeah,
here.
Pennsylvania always has a white Christmas. So does upstate. Hopefully the cities things keeps us warm. So seeing no unfinished business, I'm gonna lean into the new business. And at this time, before I get started, for clarity, Daniel, do you want to lead off or do you want to follow? I just want to know. All right. Maybe he has to gather himself. Has everybody received the document? The summary of the modifications? Should have had it in your email. Yes? Yes, no?
No.
I did. It was very comprehensive. Thank you for sharing it.
All right.
I don't
The
think
only-
I got it.
It went
Did
out.
it come, when did it go out?
It probably went out right after it was voted on the 22nd or so.
Oh, maybe I
23rd?
do have it.
All right.
That's so long ago. I can't
Yeah.
remember. I might have.
I should have sent it out again. Apologies for that. Or if I could have, now, Shin, could you possibly send that out to the committee members now?
Yeah, I'm
Could you
doing it
pull
right
that
now.
out? Appreciate it. Just to keep
Thank you.
everybody, they're having a hard time logging on. Let me share a link. Just give me a second. In the meantime, I'll share my screen to that. Did everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me move that over.
Yes.
Yeah, just give me a second. Let me just read the screen and
It's better. Yeah.
All right. So the summary of the New York City Council City for All, which is what the modifications proposal was called, right? It was called the City for All. I mentioned that I don't know if it was at our last meeting, but I definitely mentioned it at the general board meeting, which has comprehensive changes to each proposals. We know going into this that we have to understand when resources get deployed in the city, very often than not, those proposals get pushed through. It may not be the version of the original proposal, but our voices and our concerns often get considered, but some version of it usually gets passed, right? So throughout that time, I tried to just temper our expectations. I didn't think that this would totally get thrown out, not with the resources and the dollar amount that was deployed towards it. And an example of that would be what happened with congestion pricing. That it was it had stopped for a period, but when people have resources and the lobbyists have their marching orders, plans like that often get pushed through, which it has, as you know, got reduced from 15 to 9. The plan still goes out. So we'll just go over. It's pretty clear, but really I'm doing this just to make sure that there was understanding. We thoroughly went over the original town-centered zoning, right? It bullet pointed the most critical parts of that particular plan. And many of our concerns that we actually wrote up, a lot of the concerns that were shared amongst other community boards. So there's no zoning incentive for low density areas. I believe that was exactly word for word, probably one of ours. And they've put a 20% affordability incentive for large projects, 50 units. Can take full advantage of the town center zonings with 20% affordable, 80% area median income, which we know what that means. It's an improvement from what was there, but there goes the AMI again, right? It's just something that we have to pay attention to. And, as things come in or as these changes start to develop, this is going to get colored more, right? There's going to be a different type of language that's going to back these modifications and verbiage that's going to make it much more clear of what the intention and what the outcome is going to be. And hopefully, once we get that, we'll follow through with it. But being that we've reviewed the original document, we're just going to go over the modifications now. And as those changes come in, we'll see how that language looks, right? Number 2 would be 1 and 2 family homes should be protected, even if they're under commercial areas. The modification says do not allow town center developments in areas where commercial overlays are single or isolated block or on a block with a commercial overlay that today is developed with mostly 1 or 2 family homes. So they have put some protections in place, but you have to have some knowledge that our district is unique, right? They may be 1 or 2 family homes, but they're not zoned that way, right? We have underutilized far many of our neighborhoods. So you have to see how those protections actually get colored in. I did get an email, which I just realized didn't get sent out, from a member that had concerns. She was on a block. She said that all the homes, she tried to check the zoning, they were R6, and she's seen a lot of development and she didn't quite understand why it was happening. So we have to do better, we have to do better to try to, or I have to do better to try to get the information that's hidden behind these zoning designations, just so everyone understands what their exposure could potentially be, right? So that covers town center zoning. Now we have transit orientated development. The concern there was that there was no zoning incentive for low density areas to build affordable housing. We have the modification of 20% affordable incentives for large projects, 50 units and plus. That seems to be the cornerstone, 50 units and plus. Can take full advantage of transit-oriented development if 20% is affordable and 80% is area medium income. affordable again, area median income. You know, what do these words mean? What do these terms mean? Hopefully we get some clarity before it jumps to the next level.
But it's only
Uh,
20%.
Exactly. The 20% threshold is low.
Yeah,
She's talking about a 50-unit home. 20% of that is,
where it
Is it
used to be
possible-
30%.
yeah.
Is it possible for you guys to send us the maps of where these zones are? Because just seeing the R4 and R5 is really not helpful.
The maps of where these zones are,
Mm-hmm.
the maps can be obtained by going to zola.nyc.gov. You can put in your zip code, and it's not technically a map. It's your entire block and district, right? Each home is designated by a classification, and on each block, there could be various classifications, but mostly they're contextually the same, right? How can I show that?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, yes.
if you like, I can email either you or whoever the ADM, if she's online, a map, just one page that shows them.
Yeah,
zone-
that could help. You could email it to, email it to me and I'll share it up. But
Okay, good. Give,
yeah, and this is getting into where we need to try to color the excuse me. I lost something here. That's what I was doing. Let's see. Okay, there it is. Very good. Where we're trying to explain the R5 and the R4s and where they are. So I'm gonna try to attempt to do that kind of quickly. Hopefully just to not lose anybody in the language. I'm gonna go to the website that I just told you about. It could give you an idea, and then hopefully in the meantime, I'll get that map, which can
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chair,
yeah,
have they made it so that anyone can access Zola now?
everyone can access Zola.
Okay, because before you had to be invited. Okay,
Yeah. Zona
There's a-
planning.
There's a link I've added in the chat to the website for you guys to have some clarity.
thank you.
Zoom in. Yeah, here we go.
We're still in the document, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
yeah, yeah, I'm just trying
Okay.
I'm trying to get the map so it's clear, or pick something so that I could actually, I guess I picked 1028. I wanted to zoom in just so I could show an example. There we go. All right. So, yeah, let me just share this real quick and then we'll fall back with the other information. So I'll stop this and I'll share this. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Was it Khadijah?
Yes.
Is that how you say your name? Khadijah?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
All right, so
Yes.
Khadijah, this is 1028. I picked an address, 1028 New York Avenue between Snyder and Tilden, right? You can see that the entire central portion of the block is rated R6. Do you see that? See that?
Yeah.
Where it says R6 right here?
I
But you
see.
see like this building over here says R6? You see, you click the building and it shows the designation. I don't know if I'm saying this properly. Saying it clearly? See that? All right, so here's the blocking lot. Right? And you see over here where my mouse is hovering, how it says R6? Khadijah?
Screen is a bit
I
small
see it.
for me. You might have to zoom in a little more.
Oh, I'm talking about on the right side, underneath the address where it says zoning district.
So when we are looking at R6 right now, are we saying like this area? So this is more of Flatbush, Flatbush
Yeah.
area. It's
Yeah, this is
considered
the Flatbush
R6.
area, and you can see as you zoom out without, diving into any particular area, or if you want to pick somewhere where you're, where there's more homes, like over here on Albany, right? If you was to click a property over here, it's R5, right? But the chances are, when you click this property and you look to the right of the map, you're able to see where it says 955 Albany Avenue. Everybody can see that? On the right side?
Yes.
Yeah.
So underneath that, you have the block and lot. In the past, to get this information, you would need to have a block and lot and borough number, which made it quite difficult. What this website does, it actually created like a a visual representation of all of that information. So you could actually type the address now, which is good, and find out exactly what something is zoned. Underneath it, you see how it says zoning district
Yes.
with the hyperlink 5. So if you were to click this, it would take you to what the residential zoning district is, and then define what could be built in that zoning district. That's why the tool, the Zola tool is important, right? It can tell you, not in a layman's way, there's still some understanding, but it does try to do a good job of trying to explain what can be built, right? And it gives a small little lesson of open area ratio and floor area ratio, which are the two mechanisms that allow buildings to go as high as it needs to go or can go based on the zoning district. And just quickly, our districts have homes that are underutilizing that number, right? In the past, many years ago, probably before, the neighborhood looked the way that it did, very long before, they couldn't fill this area or didn't have enough housing to fill this area with the buildings that they were originally planning to build them with initially. So to fill them in, they put a lot of single and 2-family and some 3-family homes in our neighborhood, right? That zoning has never changed in 60 years or so, right? It hasn't changed in 60 years. So what you're seeing in your neighborhood is you're seeing developers or real estate investors come in, start to purchase these homes, and now they're maximizing the allowable build for the property now, right? The maximum. So you may see at this home, when you view it upright, you may go there and see a single family home. We know the example on the corner of Brooklyn and Church Avenue. Or is that Albany? No, Brooklyn and Church, right? Brooklyn and Church Avenue, there used to be a single family home. It's sprawled over multiple lots. Where is it? Right over here. This used to be, well, where the footprint is now, used to be a single family home, and it absorbed these 3 lots that were here. The rest of this was just used for parking. But because it's across the 3 lots, when this home was purchased, they got 3 parcels, and now in its place, I believe there's 3 buildings. So where one home used to be, there's now 3 buildings. Where they had an R5 on the Church Avenue side, on the internal side, they had another R5. So they were able to combine 3 lots or so. I would have to go look it up to see. And then with open space, they have to leave a few feet from the street, but open space ratio allows them to actually build higher because it concentrates their actual footprint of the building to a higher number. So where 3-story or 2-story house used to be, now you have 3-story apartment buildings. But getting this information out is kind of difficult, but this is the tool that I use when I'm asked or inquired about what's going on in the neighborhood. And then I actually, I don't do the Google Sheets thing. Sometimes I have to drive there to see what's there because a lot has changed. The way that we remember these blocks aren't exactly the way that they used to be. So I encourage everyone to use the website. Thank you. I think Melanie put it inside the link. And this should help you understand the terms when we're reviewing the documents or any documents, because this is the language of land use. Everything is spoken in zoning districts and floor area ratio and what these terms mean. And once you understand what they mean and you start to look around the neighborhood, you'll understand and recognize 6 homes. Yeah, 6 homes, sorry. Yeah, I think you are right. It's 3 and 3. Yeah, so 6 homes along the stretch of Brooklyn and Church. You'll start to recognize what's going on and what our exposures to be. But we will be speaking to that tonight. We do have something to discuss with that tonight. I just got to make sure that Danny can enter the meeting. Thank you, Chair James. And I'll also share this. Just give me a second. As a more simplified version, let me share that also. This is a more simplified or a simplified version of what the zoning map can look like in our neighborhood. It's not coming up. Yeah. All right. Can you, I don't know if it's showing both. Are you seeing both of these?
Yeah,
Earlier, we were able to see it side by side. What you did. a
You're
moment ago.
overlapping.
I'm overlapping? All right, hold on. Sorry. New computer. Just getting the gist of it. Better? Better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's better.
So I'll keep
Yes.
this up.
That's good.
I'll keep this up, and thank you, Chair James, for sharing. This is Community Board 17, right now. How it's zoned currently. So when we're speaking to these R4s, to 1 to 5 FARs, now you have a visual representation of where those areas are. All right? Does that help, Khadijah?
It helps a lot, thank you.
Great. So transit
Mr. Chair,
oriented.
sorry.
Yep,
Can I go ahead?
absolutely.
Just to very quickly address the issue talking about the underutilized R6. Years ago, before the community was brown or black, racial covenant restrictions were put into place to prohibit the rental and sale of the land to persons of color.
Correct.
So where you see like row houses and developments, most of them have racial covenants on them. So that's one of the reasons why for a long time they were not able to develop those properties because of those, for example, on 49th Street between Clarkson and Rutland, right? So the point I'm making here is that if you're having an issue, and I think somebody mentioned, that's what I'm mentioning, somebody mentioned they were having the issue on their block, every one of us should go to Queens and look at your block and see if there's a racial covenant that prohibits the developer from tearing down the houses and building multifamily houses on it. Because most of our area has racial covenants, which the courts will uphold if it says you can't go more than 2-3 stories on a particular piece of land. I hope that helps explain why it is there appears to be an underutilization of FAR, right? And that's because of those racial covenants.
Thank you. And the best way to understand it truly is to look at your own property, right? If you're a homeowner or the property of somebody you know, use the Zola Planning Gov website, go to that property. You'll learn what it's zoned for. You'll see what the ability for that property can be. Then you'll see what's there. It's a lot of the reason why you see a lot of 2 additional stories going on top of some properties in our neighborhood, because they're keeping the framework and they're adding the 2 additional stories that's allowed, right? It's a game. It's an unfortunate one, which for many years we were trying to get corrected and get the protections in place. We weren't very successful. And fortunately, there was a tidal wave of contextual zonings that happened under the Bloomberg administration. We weren't really a part of that, which left us exposed to potential, it's being built as of right, which means that they don't need to really get permission to add on what's permissible. And that's the issue we've been dealing with basically on this map. You see, we would be
As of right.
the as of right, yeah, because there's no these buildings are going up as they're allowed. So they don't need to go through a URLAP. They don't need to go get permission to build those buildings as high as they can, because they're allowed to go as high as what's allowed. In the past, that wasn't done. Like Chair James said, there were let's call it for what it is. It was redlining, right? They didn't allow persons of color to live in these neighborhoods. And because of that, they restricted the ability for them to be able to utilize the land as far as having these buildings that they have now. We're a lot more dense now. Those older rules have gone away. The original people that owned in this neighborhood have moved on to other areas. And now that those sales are starting to happen over time, you're seeing the original city's plan come to fruition. That's what's happening. Unfortunately, but yeah. Everyone can, so the split screen is working. You can see the map on the left, and this is working. Thank you, Chair James. You have the concern for the TOD, which was the transit orientated zonings, right? And now they're excluding all R1 and R2 single family districts from the TOD eligibility. And they reduced the TOD radius to the outermost stations of the Long Island Railroad Metro North within the city from a half mile to a quarter mile, which I got to figure out what that means, you know. We got what that means. Obviously, you look in our district, we see we don't have, we're not affected by that at this time. Now, accessory dwelling units, another thing that was very contentious. The thing with ADUs is that it's participation based, right? Your neighbor could choose to participate and get an ADU, whether it would be getting their basement redone or allowing for a garage to be converted into some sort of living space. And those living spaces, most of the concerns was that they could object the view, they'll change the look of the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. There's actually more provisional changes that happened. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the concern was ground floor and basements and ADUs are at risk of flooding, coastal flooding, and inland flood zones. This affected, I think, Canarsie more than our district, even though some areas of our district are considered flood zones now, which is interesting. The modification prohibited ground floor ADUs, detached extensions, and basement ADUs in both the coastal flooding zones and areas the city identifies as vulnerable, which we're going to need somebody to clarify how they came up with those, how they identified those areas, what data that they utilized. And in the coming days, we'll see that. Like a lot of the stuff that we're going to be discussing tonight is going to have to be given to us in some format, especially when we get to the parking zones, right? The language is there, but how it actually affects our neighborhood isn't quite clear yet. We can make, we have enough information to make assertions and assumptions, but to know exactly how that map looks, we would need that map to be developed first. I don't know if that map was actually distributed yet. It wasn't distributed at the time I was reviewing this. All right. The second concern, impact ADUs, both detached and unattached, which will newly be constructed in backyards, which is what I spoke on. It prohibits the detached and attached ADUs and zonings within the R1A, R2A, R3A districts. When you see something followed with an A, correct me if I'm wrong, that's a contextual zoned district, right? So we don't have any of those yet anyway, right? So they basically said that in those contextual areas that you're not allowed to build. The second one saying detached and attached backyard ADUs in historic districts, right? Historic districts, which we have a few. We have one really that I know about in our neighborhood. Historic districts are usually defined by seeing the brown signs, right? A brown sign means that it's historically protected. Everything on that block needs to remain as it was via a snapshot, I think like back in the 1920s. And in this committee, we've had to, the unfortunate thing is in this committee, we had to allow or give permission for them to actually do modifications to their home, which is a good thing. So you're protected by having a historic district, but everything that comes with the protection, there's a caveat, right? So historic districts, I don't think that they would have been able to do that anyway, but putting those in place now is good. ADUs can only be one story unless parking is provided on the first floor, which means that's interesting. That's interesting, which means it could potentially be 2 stories. That's how my brain navigates that information. Prohibit ADUs in attached or row houses. Prohibit ADUs covering more than 33% of the rear yard. So there are protections in place in many of our homes, at least the ones that I know I've seen, wouldn't be able to get away with the last provision, right? Did I see a hand raised? Sorry, because I have the screen up. Not sure if I got notified that a hand was raised. Yes, you're acknowledged.
I did have my hand raised. I was just drawing a point about the importance of being intentional when you do become landmarked. Because we did have some landmark build structures in Bed-Stuy that were still taken down because of a mere infraction. They put a wrong window in or a wrong door in. So yeah, landmarking is good, but we have to be hyper vigilant with that as well. I just wanted to make sure that that caveat was noted.
Thank you. The last concern concerning ADUs, will the cost of the building or legalized ADUs be attainable for typical homeowners? Will it lead to speculation and corporate purchases of homes? Modification is required that the homeowner live on the property to have an ADU, which is a smart provision, right? If it's something that's allowed by participation of someone living there, the person living there should be, I don't know how that'll be enforced, but it's a good rule to have, or a protection to be in place. Right. And then the last was response to assist homeowners with our detailed policy investment commitment. See City of All for commitments. Speaking of that, low density district fixes yard block coverage. Yeah, I don't think that this affects us too much. Not as much as it. Yeah, I didn't really think that. It seems like that would be more in Queens. And probably some spots in 14 that would fall into that modification and that specific rule. The UAP was another thing. Universal affordability preference, the concern. The UAP does not require any deeply affordable units. I think that might have been our suggestion verbatim. They put these modifications in place. 20% seems to be a favored number of UAP units and projects with at least 10,000 square feet of UAP floor area to be affordable for families earning 40% of the area median income, targeting incomes between 40 and 70,000. Seems like you're getting a lot for a little, but I guess, they fought for us so that we wouldn't get anything at all, I think I can get deed info. Sorry, that popped up quick. Reduce the allowable height for UAPs to 10 feet in R8B and narrow streets in R6 and R7-1 districts. So the R8B is another contextual zone district, but it does help us because we do have R6 and R7-1 within our district. So they're trying to, reduce the height, which is twofold. The height, somebody gets 2 lots, you can increase the width, so it's just, it's one of those things. And the most contentious one, which I know I'm going to be getting calls about probably for the next year or so, is the parking mandates, right? Universal, you wouldn't think that it would be a universal thing in the city. A lot of community boards, particularly in Manhattan, right, were for this. They were for the complete removal. So seeing that they changed it and didn't make it a one-size-fit-all plan is actually, I'm quite happy about it. I just wish that they had more time to develop the zones. I know that the council people were at work speaking to their constituents. They came up with this, and we'll go over it. Modification, because we know what the concern was. They created 3 geographical zones to tailor to the parking requirements appropriately across the city to balance the need for parking. Very important. Zone number 1, no parking requirements. In Manhattan, except Inwood, Long Island City, and parts of Western Queens and Brooklyn. More or less the areas that are nearest to Manhattan. They will allow that mandate to not, there will be no parking mandates in those areas. These areas are very good with transit, which is true. Lower commute times, high shares of commuters to Manhattan, which is also true. And they eliminate the residential parking requirement entirely for new developments. So if you ever decide to move to those neighborhoods that we're speaking about, a lot of fires today. I don't know. It's cold, so I guess the space heaters are coming out. Everyone be careful. Zone 2, reduce parking requirements reduced parking requirements, areas with access to transit, but longer commute times and greater reliance on cars, which wasn't taken into consideration at all with the original one. So we did have people speaking to what our needs are and what our concerns were. Significant reduction on multifamily residential parking requirements. Right now, the requirement is 70%. 70%, I believe. Since I last looked, it would be 70% of the units of a building will require a spot. So seeing how that gets reduced will be interesting. We always knew that they didn't have provisions in place to cover every single spot for every single unit, which is what a lot of people wanted. But that goes against the developer's idea of having units versus spots. They always saw it as pieces and parcels of their property that they can't earn income on. So they went against it, but they are reducing it. So when that language comes out, we'll see what that reduction looks like. And we'll see, hopefully it stays near or at the 70%, but doesn't get below the 50% threshold. It's better than the first one, I guess better than zone 1, which is nothing at all. We have zone 2, which I think we might be exposed to based to the language, but how much we wouldn't know. The zone 3 is to maintain most parking requirements. In these areas, parking will likely be produced to meet the market demand regardless. Locations, areas behind geographies where greater car dependency and keep most of the parking requirements. Eliminating mandates to maximize housing. The form of housing development that parkers would most interfere with would largely be exempt from mandates regardless of the zones, ADUs, conversions, affordable housing unit, transit-oriented zoning, town-centered development in zone 3, affordable housing would have to be reduced. Will have a reduced requirement in town-centered developments over 75 units will have the standard requirement. So that's important because there are still provisions in there to have reductions even when we have TOD exposure. So regardless of how the map colors our zones, we have, I think there was a map. I just want to skip to the bottom. There was like here we go. There was like a little cheat sheet that simplified that information, So if you wanted to understand what they meant, basically, hopefully when we get this map, blue means it's a free-for-all. 2 means that there's some change, and then 3 means that there's even less requirement. 3, I would think, would be in areas like, I don't think that we would classify as a 3, to be honest. I would think that would be more tethered to areas, probably Mill Basin, like College Point and Queens, areas that are notorious two-fare zones where they have express buses and et cetera to get people to the city quickly. Those will probably most likely be the areas. It's all assumptions. We don't really know exactly what it is, but we know that it was discussed, and as it gets colored, we'll have a much clearer picture on how we're affected. Hands up. Joan? Hand raise? Is that from before? It might be from before. I'll make this bigger. And Hazel?
This all seems very vague. They voted yes on something today, but we're not clear on exactly what it is. Is that the case?
They voted yes, I think, on probably a more ingratiated version of this. I think that this is what was released to the public to, I guess, get like bullet points of what was addressed for each particular area. I'm sure it'll be colored more because I'm sure they went into the debate, but to put all of that information here now would probably be too much in a short time frame. So I'm pretty sure we'll get a full spelled out version of what this is. It is significant with the changes. So the language is going to have to.
I don't see where our community is really going to benefit from this at all. I mean, because to me, it's all been it's a campaign promise being fulfilled, and the developers must be so happy today. But I don't see how it's going to benefit the residents here. Our community has already been devastated by all of these buildings already, which we get no credit for. And when you pass through other communities, they're untouched, and they were going to remain so.
It seems like that's the case. Oh, some communities, believe it or not, voted yes because they have their protections in place, right? And they're not going to be affected. Like you saw with the contextual areas. If you lived in a contextual area and it wouldn't affect you, you know, it's the not in my backyard mentality. Everyone's going to say, sure, you can build everywhere but here, you know.
Well,
And
you
they
know,
went for it.
everything in the city is not fair or equal. It doesn't matter what protections you have.
True, but I think that it's acknowledged
Favored
that
people.
it's been acknowledged by our borough president, it's been acknowledged by our council people that we have participated much more than anyone else. That has never been denied, even in the meeting that I attended in October. And the issue there was always balance. I'm not sure how balance is going to get achieved with this, but we knew that some version of this was going to get throttled through. We just hope that there's enough there to, you know, equal the playing field, you know, and if people wanted to participate in what the original proposal was, that the lion's share goes to those areas with which is reflected, I will say, in the parking mandates. How it's going to be reflected with anywhere else, because those were mostly the areas that were from me listening to the 11 hours. Those areas that are in the no zone were the areas that were going for it. They had the loudest voices when it became to that particular topic with parking. They got what they asked for. We'll see how they respond in time when everything gets executed.
So were the elected officials.
Elected officials, we know that our borough president he's historically
Please.
supported this from the beginning. So he hasn't changed his stance, which I have to respect. I mean, he he didn't get moved off of whatever he feels is necessary. I'm not sure. He has his concerns, but I guess he weighed them, and even without concerns in hand, he still decided to push forward and support it. You know,
He doesn't even
vehemently.
come to this community, so he wouldn't know. He can find his way here with GPS. So I know that he could care less what we get over here because they have plans for this community. And it's not what we want.
Plans have always been in place, and that's the message that I really want to share. It's just being deployed, and we're dealing with the ramifications of it. Fortunately, thank you for coloring, Ms. Martinez. The citywide proposal, removing zoning interest to shared housing, restricted on shared housing, what still exists elsewhere, concern shared housing regulation, must prioritize housing equality, tenants' rights, safety, sustainability of locations. Code. Yeah, I also got some information that there's a lot of administrative code that's changing along with this and amongst other things that are happening. I will take note to mention that they are changing, or they have updated the New York City electrical code. It does have a lot of provisions that will change probably in the next 8 months. So if you were trying to do anything electrically in your homes, now would be the time. Before they start making certain mandates, and it's going to cost you a lot more to do something simple, right? The infills.
Quick question, with
Yes.
some of these modifications, are they gonna require certain things to be done to the home? Because I've heard that they've asked other homeowners in other regions to now install sprinklers inside their homes as a part of the process if they decide to add an additional level. Was this mentioned or was this not mentioned at all?
It's probably there in the administrative code. It was always there. Once you get over a certain story of home, sprinkler systems are required. This is to counteract fire escapes, right? Like the old fire escape rule is if you were over, I think, 3 stories, you would need a fire escape. Many buildings in our community still have fire escapes, right? But the new rule would be that if you were to extend it, then yes, you would need a sprinkler system that's annually checked or monthly checked and annually inspected and maintained. So yeah, it's probably going to be involved in a lot of this, along with the electrification of the city, right? They're trying to do away with natural gas. A lot of these newer homes are all going to have electric. and electric stoves, electric dryers, electric washing machines, and obviously LED lighting to try to offset that. So there's going to be changes. And the fact that this is changing and the code is changing is not being done by mistake. It's something that needed to probably happen for both fiscal reasons, and obviously the narrative is always housing. Even though we could technically go around our neighborhood and see a lot of vacant properties, building more unfortunately doesn't make them come, which we have seen. But we have to digress. We have to deal with what we have, see how it affects, point out concerns in the right place, but hopefully we'll get the right protections in place so that we're not totally affected. And we'll speak to that a little bit later on. Citywide proposal for landmark transfers. This was interesting. This was very interesting. Convert all landmarks transfers from special permit to certification, allow bulk modifications through authorization. Man, they were trying to shoehorn that in. Proposal may allow sites receiving additional floor area ratio to be far larger than normally allowed by zoning, which is true. Special permits can be retained to allow for community input or substantial changes. Okay, larger than 25%. Huh. I don't know. How I feel about that. Let's see. This community, and then I'm just trying to get to the bullet points that affects us the most. Yeah, so this is important, right? The fear from basically every portion of the city of Yes fans, from the economic opportunity to the housing, was the reduced input of community boards, right? Seemed like they were trying to, or attempt to, in the language, put provisions in that would allow these developers to move forward without community input. Right? So it seems like they're trying to keep that in. There's some language, but we need to see that covered. We need to see that spelled out. Basically, what we're saying is that in the last few years, we've had 2-year applications, and the original proposals in many different ways would have removed that requirement. They wouldn't have needed it. I just need to dive into that, see if they kind of kept that in place and kept those strengths where they need to be. The special zoning districts, we know that was the new proposed districts, which was like the R10, 11, and 12, I believe. To achieve a specific planning and urban design goals, defined areas, unique characteristics, to interfere with those distinctive qualities should be modified. Changes made to preserve the design intent of the special districts. You see, like, again, we don't know what that means. You know me, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like you said, it's quite vague, but it's what we have for now. I'm going to stop sharing this so we can speak on it. And then I'm going to have Daniel, you ready? Anybody here? Daniel, you available? No? Anybody see him in the chat?
Hi, Kwame. I'm here.
All right, sorry.
Whenever you're ready for me to chime in on the council member's viewpoint, I'm ready. So let me know when.
Yeah, I'm just going to lead into it. So, yeah, there was, as you know, the city of Yes was voted on today. And I'm going to allow Danny to just speak on what came out of it and what happened. I'm just not going to lead into it. There's no really soft way to say what he's about to say. So, Daniel, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. You are all likely familiar with me. I'm Daniel Heredia, Legislative Communications Liaison for Councilmember Lewis. I'm going to hope that you all can hear me okay. I'm a little in transit at this time, but I want to make sure that I am able to convey the sentiments of the council members so you all understand the nuances of today's vote. So just as a quick recap, last month when I was before this committee spoke about where we were in the process still of negotiating. Well, the city council was in the process of negotiating some of this very document with the administration. At the time, the city council did not have, there was definitely not enough votes for the city of Yes to pass. There was a lot of concern that, with these proposals, they were not, as originally presented to our community boards, they were not reflective of the communities, especially as it pertains to CB 17, is with the parking and as well as some of the major areas like ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and some other provisions that Kwame has outlined here. So the city council, basically, the way that the negotiations transpired is that we all, we worked lockstep with Kwame and other community leaders across CB 17, 18, and 14, which make up the majority of Council District 45, to get a sense of what the big changes that we needed if we wanted to support this. Additionally, there were other provisions made and promises made to us if the council member supported this proposal, including a piece of the pie of the $5 billion that was negotiated from the mayor to support infrastructure, agency to support, and infrastructure agency support, as well as housing programs. Now, these components went into the negotiations with the administration, and those modifications were passed at the city council stated meeting 2 weeks ago. So those were referred back to CPC, City Planning Commission, for approval, the document that you see here. Now, the other components that and while obviously there's questions you all may have on, how much does this really do to protect CB 17 from overdevelopment, it is a very different proposal than what was originally presented. The biggest ones that should be noted is that CB 17 is completely excluded from the elimination of parking requirements. It might be unclear from the map, but because of the changes that were made, now new developments will still require provisioning of parking, which were no longer in the proposal. Similarly, the provision of accessory dwelling units, which a lot of people in our community complain to our office about, were rectified because now any block or any inland flooding zone is now exempted from accessory dwelling units, meaning that the areas that we do experience lots of flooding and lots of infrastructure issues such as Clarendon Road, Ralph Avenue, Church Avenue, Avenue D, where we see during the rain we have a lot of these issues, those ADUs are now banned. So we have secured that restriction in the current plan in the modifications. Now, the council members' vote was contingent on us getting some of those resources. Now, the city of Yes passed today 30 council members in the affirmative and 21 council members in the negative. While we were up until the very last minute, and Kwame knows this because we were talking even earlier this week, up to the very last minute, we were still in negotiation. Councilmember Lewis supports these modifications because the thing is, if we pass the plan and we do not play ball with the administration, they would steamroll the original plan. That would allow them, especially with components such as town center zoning, to be building 5-story buildings on places like Avenue D because they are zoned for commercial. So we had to make sure that we got our provisions to make sure that we stopped that from happening, which we did successfully stop. Everywhere that you see on Zola that had a C overlay, originally the plan for City of Yes allowed a 5-story building to be placed with residents with a commercial property on the first floor and 4 stories of residential above. Now we were able to stop that. We were able to make it so that it stays the same. We're exempted from it with some of the negotiations. We also made a amount of negotiations with issues in CB 14 as it relates to landmarks, because most of the landmark areas in the community is mostly in the CB 14 area, with an exception of the East Street. There's a couple of
Daniel, you're breaking
I don't
up.
know about anyone else, but I can't hear you.
Nah, we lost Danny. He
Yeah.
said he was in transit.
Mhm.
All right. He'll probably I don't know, maybe he's going through a zone where he is his mic is still active. But
We're in a dead zone.
yeah, he's probably in a dead zone. He'll reconnect. But in the meantime,
Kwame,
Allison?
can you hear me? I
Yo, you
apologize
back?
for that.
All right, cool,
Yes,
yeah.
I
I
apologize.
see you, Allison. I'll let Daniel finish and then I'll acknowledge your hand, Allison. Go
All
ahead,
right.
Danny.
Apologies. Yes, so just to wrap that up. So yes, so the proposals that you see in here, in short, were a series of aggregated wins that the council secured from the administration. Now, folks full transparency, you're aware that Councilmember Lewis was one of the negative votes, one of the votes against this proposal. The reason why that we had switched the vote at this stage mainly was due to the fact that even at the 11th hour, we did not get the amount of commitment that we wanted in terms of what infrastructure we were getting, particularly the $2 billion that was made for a carve out for infrastructure upgrades. We were not able to get a commitment from the administration that it would actually come into our district or even Brooklyn at all. That deal, actually, a lot of that funding was going to places like the Bronx or to Queens, but it was not, there's no guarantee that it was really coming into our district. Similarly, the provisions that we were asking for in terms of navigating the ADU process for folks who even want to legalize their basements, it didn't go far enough for the folks in our community. And the biggest problem with this entire proposal is that no matter how much administration wanted to approach us and say, we want you to ignore your community board, we want you to vote in support of this process, that we did not have any commitments in writing. Even to right now at this point, the $5 billion that was touted as being provided by the administration is not actually in the budget. So next year, when it comes time for budget season, the mayor doesn't legally have to give us anything. And so for those reasons, Councilmember Lewis did vote no on the final vote today out of principle to recognize the 2 out of 3 community boards in our district that voted no on this proposal. The modifications that we discussed today and the protections that we secured are still going into effect. And the administration still, which was one of the major wins for us, will still support us in a contextual rezoning for CB17, which was one of the main components of why the council member voted yes on the amendments 2 weeks ago. So we want to make sure that we'll continue fighting to make sure that those things go into effect, our wins in terms of these modifications and that contextual rezoning process when that gets underway next year. We will be working with you all in lockstep to make sure that happens, but we did not want to make sure that that yes vote was in vain when they turn around and do not give us the budgetary ask to improve the infrastructure in our district. So that's a brief summary of what led the council member to her vote today. I hope that helps, and if Kwame, if there were any more technical questions about some of these modifications and how it pertains to certain blocks, I can do my best to answer those this evening. Thank you.
Okay. 2 hands, 3 hands. Allison, you're acknowledged.
Thanks.
Welcome.
I just, a couple of things. I just wanted to, if we could have some sort of summary or write-up of exactly what the plan is for CB17's rezoning, because I know I participated in a call with Rita Joseph and the council's land use committee, staff about pushing that rezoning through with the city of Yes. So just so we can get a little bit more like color that we could read and share with people about that, where that goes now. I also wanted to find out if I came on late, so I don't know if there's more clarity on how the ADUs would be treated tax-wise by Department of Finance, or
any of the other agencies, if there's any decisions were made about that. And you'd mentioned something about the ADUs wouldn't be allowed in certain corridors due to like infrastructure issues. So what is the plan then, should those infrastructure issues be put together in a plan for like shovel-ready projects that could be led to make sure that we're addressing the infrastructure issues that we have, so that people in those areas, should they want to add additional units to their properties, be able to do so? I don't know who you all are talking to or with, but I'd like to get some more color on who those parties are.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still sharing that.
Thank you so much for those questions, Allison. I will start with first in terms of the plan for the contextual rezoning. Yes, so the contextual rezoning, all rezonings are led by the Department of City Planning. The ones that applied to, say, for instance, the 2009 Flatbush rezoning that CB14 went under, was led by the Department of City Planning. It's obviously in consultation with the community board, but the agency it's under the agency's purview. It's not to say, oh, council member wants this block to be R7A and this other block to be R3X, or it's not like that. The DCP is the agency that conducts the public hearings on this, and it's usually a very long process that other neighborhoods have gone through to achieve this. Now, in terms of timeline, we are looking for next year for this to be a FY 2026 matter, meaning that will start later in 2025. We're going to try to push DCP to do that and hold up their end of the bargain that allowed City of Yes to pass today. That's something that all the community, the council members will have to be involved in. Councilmember Rita Joseph, Councilmember Farrah Lewis, and Councilmember Chris Banks, and Councilmember Darlene Mealy all have a stake. The agencies will all have to report those for the entire part of Community Board 17. So that's on that note. In terms of the ADUs and flood mitigations, there is the actual agency that has purview over flood concerns is the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP. They have a flood map, and I will make sure that before we get away with ourselves, I'll try to do it tomorrow. I'll make a note of it. I'll send to Frey in regards to what that, and they are planning on expanding the map to include one of the bills that passed. I believe it was intro 654, but I might be confused. That actually
Is he breaking up for everyone else?
oversight
Yes.
over.
Okay, sorry. You're breaking up there, Danny. Sorry.
Yes. Any better? Yes, no?
Yeah, you're better now.
Well, yeah. Okay, great. I'll just finish up this point. Yes, so basically, the DEP makes the flood map. So anywhere that gets over 3 inches of flooding, or anywhere that gets 2 inches or more of flooding after 4 inches of rain would be excluded from the ADU area. So that metric is decided by DEP, and I will send the map to Kwame. Allison, was there a last question that I may have missed?
Well, I want to know, a couple of things. Just, we all know that DEP's data is going to be, insufficient because we don't have enough data reporting within our community to begin with. But I wanted to know what the plan is in terms of getting shovel-ready projects in order, because we know the work that needs to be done within the community. We've done a lot of, studios and all kinds of, projects to identify at least some of them. What is the plan to make sure that when next year comes around and the mayor's office is doling out the funds, that we're actually in position with proposals that are ready to go? Because it seems that all of the work is coming, I guess, from the
council member's office. I don't know who else is involved, but if you could also shed light on who the other organizations or technical partners or whoever else you're working with on these projects.
Got it. Thank you. Yes. So in terms of actually getting the ADU projects on the ground, part of the $5 billion commitment, one of the $2 billion was infrastructure. The other $2 billion was support in terms of housing projects. So that is funding that is earmarked for HPD and DOB, Department of Housing Preservation Development and Department of Buildings, to do rulemaking to roll out an assistance program to help homeowners who would like to do an ADU to do those assistance for homeowners who want to do that, so they don't have to pursue an architect separately. Now, on that front, it's a good point that you bring this up. The agencies they have to do the rulemaking on this on their own. So they typically do a round of contracting for a lot of that services. HPD has contracts to organizations like NHS Brooklyn, Flatbush Development Corporation, and others that do this sort of work, that work is delegated to. But we can have a conversation to make sure that, if you have an organization or you know of an organization who wants a contract, we can make sure that you're on that list for consideration.
Thank you.
All right. I think it was Khadijah.
Okay, I have a few questions because going into talking about the ADUs, if you're saying that Community Board 17 is exempt, right, from doing it, am I correct?
I might have, to be specific, of the board that are contained within the flood zone will be prohibited from doing basement ADUs, to be specific.
Okay, so with you saying that, with those same homeowners, when it comes to flood insurance, and if they have their flood insurance through FEMA and they get wind of this, are you aware of whether there's penalties for them in regards to them not doing the compliance or actually submitting to actually do the modifications to prevent flooding coming into their homes?
Got it. Okay. So maybe just something, because I did overhear during the earlier part of the call. So the city of Yes does not require anything of a homeowner right now. If you don't want to touch your building, you are not required to do anything with your building. You don't have to change your insurance. The zoning map doesn't change. The taxes doesn't change. Nothing changes if you don't do anything. This is strictly in relation to the zoning. So if you, say, live in an area that is maybe you're further south, maybe you are by Glenwood or Avenue H, and DEP identifies that that is part of the coastal flood zone, as an example, you are not allowed to build. You are not allowed to do it. Before FEMA comes after you, the city's coming after you first for having an illegal basement. Now, if you are in an area that allows this, you still have to file a permit with DOB to make those amendments. And I do believe I did miss a question from Allison in regards to like the taxes. There is state legislation that is going with this right now that will make it such that an ADU does not force your building to become a multiple dwelling. Because normally any building that's three housing units and above, there's a whole bunch of other rules and other insurances. The state is currently working on, I think it's in the Senate and the Assembly right now, to make it such that an ADU will not subject you to additional requirements insurance-wise or tax-wise. So that's on the state. They have to do it in lockstep, and that will make it more affordable for someone doing an ADU to do it without being subject to all the same laws as like a full-time landlord with a huge building.
Okay, and then the next question I have is, now that you guys have approved this proposal with the city of Yes, is there any stipulations where they can sit here and make amendments or make modifications to everything that they said that they were going to do, but now change it in the back end? Because we've seen this done several times with other city agencies and with other developers and with other programs where the original program and what was passed for is not what actually happened at the end.
Great question. Thank you for that. So in relation to whether changes can be made, so this is normally agencies, and by agencies I mean the mayor, the administration, normally do things like rulemaking, where they can pretty much set up a hearing and make changes whatever they want to the rules. But the zoning in relation, this is a zoning map, zoning text amendment. This is in the law of the city. This is passed. This goes up to the state. The state has to certify. This is not changing. What the document that Kwame has shared with you all is law at this point. There's no changes made to this. Now, which is now on the components that the mayor has offered, including programs to help homeowners take advantage of these changes. That's or the infrastructure upgrades. That $5 billion, that is not law. And that is one of the reasons why Councilmember Lewis, though she supports the amendments to make sure that they don't just do unchecked development across the district, that's not law. You know, if the mayor decides, oh, I don't want to give you the $5 billion, then he could do that. So, but the actual text amendment that you've seen today, that cannot change unless if they go through this entire process over again, because that was the only way that this law as a ULURP could be passed.
But even with it being what it is, it's vague. So it could be interpreted in several different ways. So how does this get modified to make sure that it's not changed in a way, that it affects Community Board 17? Because it's very vague. It's not saying directly what exactly is it going to do. It says particularly, hey, this is what we're going to do, and then wait for the modification.
Okay, understood. So it may be perceived as vague. I think more accurate to be called is it's written in lawyer talk. It's written in planning and land use talk. It's not really written in a way that people, you know, like you and I or anyone else may be able to generally understand. And that is a real issue. You know, the actual entire proposal is over 1,300 pages. This was one of our major gripes with why they would shove this down our throats in the way that they did through a ULURP. Now, if you have specific questions, and what our office will be doing before Christmas is will be to generate a newsletter that actually breaks down every proposal in every specific block of the district, because we have access to those maps. The proposals today are very, very different than they were a month ago. So I will make sure that that's included. We want to make sure that there's a visual representation, because I do understand your viewpoint that the document is vague because it's written very technically, but there will be visual guides coming out that will block by block say what has changed, and that will come out between now and the end of the year.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Danny, there'll be some unified version of the text amendment that includes the city of all changes. There'll be a final version of it that collectively has everything in it, right? Released at some point. That we'll be able to review the official version with the modification language in it as a complete proposal. That's going to be in the coming days, I would hope, or coming weeks.
Yes. So yes. So the council website will have the City for All plan. The main stipulation again is that whether the mayor abides by all of them is what we have to see go into fruition next year. But the plan will be posted on the council website, and I make sure that gets to you.
Thank you. You just got a few more hands and then you release Danny. Chair James, and then Hazel, and then Joan.
Okay.
My comment wasn't so much to Daniel, so I can pass. It was more in response to the previous question as to where do we go forward with rezoning. And so I wanted to say that under the New York City Charter, it's very, very clear that we are required to have what's called a district service cabinet meeting. And the law specifically says DCP is supposed to come to us. Over the past years, 17 years, we've been chasing DCP. And they're pretty much turned their backs on us because why should they? Why shouldn't they? When the law says they are mandated to come to us. So to answer that question as to moving forward, what we need to have is a district service cabinet meeting where you're able to present, at least members of the board are able to present to the heads of agencies, specifically DCP, all concerns. And what I would say to you, if repeatedly we speak to DCP every month and let them know the situation in Community Board 17 is intolerable, we will achieve some measure, if not all, but at least some measure of relief.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Okay.
Oh, Hazel, sorry.
Oh,
Hazel?
okay.
Hazel Martinez.
My concern is now that we have the city of yes, I think that does away with the previous zoning regulations. And will there be any restrictions put in place, protections put in place for the homeowners to prevent the harassment that they have already experienced over the years from the developers?
I thought they did release an amendment the year before last, but you do have to sign up for it to prevent the solicitations. Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, because I don't think it was really widely,
Solicitations.
I don't think it was really widely given out to the,
we got adopted
that
in it.
information wasn't widely presented to the residents of this community.
Yeah, I'll have to get a package together to make sure that they know what the options are. Oh, it needs to be at the board office to be readily available, but I'm not speaking to the success of the program because I don't really know how to measure that. But so there is something that was put in place and our community board was included in that.
Cease and desist?
to
Because we
prevent
weren't clear on
solicitations. It
if,
was like a,
because we weren't clear on if our community board was included. And I don't, it's going to increase now. It's going to increase now.
yeah, we weren't clear because it said portions of, and you're correct. It did say portions of Community Board 17. It didn't really clarify, what that meant. So we'll have to follow up. I'm sure Danny could probably give me a hand with that to see what that language is. Again, that's following up on the language and what it means. But I do remember it passing saying portions of Community Board 17 were eligible. But we do need to get that program back on the forefront. There is something in place, but the success of it, I can't speak to, but I will say that me personally, I haven't been getting those solicitations. I used to get them emailed to me. I asked that they will be emailed to me once received, and I haven't gotten them in a while. All right.
I do apologize.
Yeah, cease and desist. There you
I
go.
do apologize.
I do have a question before
Yeah, Joan?
Daniel goes.
I do
Yes.
have a
question before
Sure.
Daniel goes. Yes. So
There you go.
two
Thank you,
things. The first
Tamara.
thing is around, so
is around.
Senator Parker actually was the one who progressed with the, there's an echo. Does anybody else hear it? It's quite disconcerting.
Yes, I hear.
Okay. So Senator Parker was the one who took care of having our community listed as a cease and desist. That's actually taken off across Brooklyn because of these out of contact that's been happening. But I'll focus on my question because one has already been asked about tax liability once implemented as it pertains to the new units. But specifically, I heard from you, Daniel, as you mentioned, $2 billion. I'm actually at an event right now where Councilmember Narcisse mentioned $5 billion for infrastructure repairs. But it seems like what you're saying is that you heard two, and the two potentially won't be in our district. So could you please provide a bit of clarity about that?
Yeah, so the statement that says that 5 billion is for infrastructure is inaccurate. 5 billion was secured from the administration for the city of Yes. $2 billion is earmarked for infrastructure capital upgrades, meaning street reconstruction, sewers, and flood mitigation across the 51 council districts in the city of New York. Another
$2 billion.
Yeah, so 2 billion is for
Wow. Okay.
it's just two. It's not it's chump change, frankly. Another $2 billion is earmarked for housing assistance and programs, meaning that is going to go to things like HPD Housing Connect. That's going to go to Home First, the first time buyers program. That's going to other housing programs in general that are not necessarily specific to the city of Yes or to homeowners, but they are important for affordable housing in general. And then 1 billion, the last remaining 1 billion is directly to HPD and DOB to increase staffing to help with planning and assisting homeowners who want to do these and take advantage of these modifications, as well as enforcement to address people who may be doing construction illegally where they're not supposed to be doing this. Because another risk that the council identified was, oh, ADUs are allowed. I can turn any old garage into whatever I want. Nope, that is not how it works. And you must go through the planning process and get your permits. And so that extra 1 billion is to aid in the agency capacity to hire more staff, new divisions to handle the new administrative load that all of these City of Yes permits will cost. So,
and does that also include the mandate that you must live in the home where the ADU exists?
yes, that is correct. So that was one of the other wins that is part of the City for All plan. That to avoid, because this plan, written as it was by the administration, would have caused a lot of speculative development by, people who want to buy up a home, turn the garage into something, and now you have a 3-apartment house that you're renting as a developer. So yes, this plan makes it such that the only way that you get the tax break and the only way that you actually are able to move forward with an ADU is that if you live on one of the apartments, one of those units, the owner has to live there. And so that $1 billion goes to enforcing that and to stop speculative development by people who just want to use a 1 to 2 story building as an investment property.
Thank you very much. I look forward to receiving the write-up, the briefing on how everything is landed. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Any more questions for Danny? All right.
It's not a question. It's just I'm just going to emphasize that our half of our problem is that we're always behind the eight ball when it comes to having our projects ready to roll. And if we're not going to put together some programs or some feasible plans for things that we know that we need, with the leaning houses and everything else, we have to be ready to actually submit things that can actually win bids and make those relationships that are necessary to get that work done. And we've got to be smarter about that, because the usual places will always get funding because people pay attention to where they live. People don't pay attention to where we live, so we have to be more aggressive. So that's all I'm gonna say in terms of like what would be helpful for our council members to help us do. That's it.
This is pertaining to shovel-ready projects, issues that we know that are in the
Correct.
community for
For the
that need to have
infrastructure,
addressed.
the infrastructure piece, and also preparing people who are going to want to move forward with getting additional income for ADUs. It's
Like the
not going to
funding
just be,
aspect,
it's
right?
the funding. It's
Yeah.
not just tax incentives. People need to have like no and low cost loans and grants. So if we're not arguing for that, because people have to have the money up front to do some of this work and to eliminate some of the risk for not being able to get, we're not always the best bank communities. We have to do some of that work to help people be prepared. So that's what I'm going to say.
No, I appreciate that feedback, Allison. It's very important to know. Yeah, basically, obviously, the money is there in theory, and the next few months is really going to be ensuring that when we hit budget negotiations in May, that not only does the mayor follow through, because the plan passed, whether or not the council member is fully trustworthy of whether the funding commitments will really come. The next few months is not only making sure that we get that money, but also, as you say, making sure that those grants come into our community. So we'll be working with HPD and DOB on this. Oftentimes the contracting process is arduous. And one of the main issues that the whole contracting process as a whole right now is with nonprofits getting money on time. I'm sure you yourself may be familiar with how the delays of HPD and DYCD are affecting nonprofits right now, even with our own discretionary funding. So all of those things will have to come into place here. So we'll have to work very diligently to make sure that the administration holds their end of the bargain on this new plan.
I agree. I'm also just going to say one thing too, is this is yet another opportunity to get some of the MWBEs in our area who can do some of the infrastructure work prepared and partnered appropriately, so that we could actually make bids for projects that work for us. So we should be using whatever we've learned from the recreation center experience to do something different this time where we can.
Thank you for that.
All right. Thank you for that, Allison. I'm not seeing any other questions. So Daniel, I think you're free to go.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be in contact, and I do need to get some information from you. We'll be in contact. So yeah, there was a lot of back and forth this week. Didn't really know how everything was going to land. There was a lot of promises, or not really promises, provisional things that were on the table. But in real time, we've learned that some of those things weren't. They were wishful commitments. Nobody wanted to commit in writing, which is interesting. But we are here, and as this the language of this gets developed and the appropriate maps color what this proposal turns into, we'll know how our community is affected. We know how we're affected now, and we should speak to Allison's point. We know what the needs are in our community. We know where our flooding areas are. We should be trying to be more aggressive and active in getting some plans together. We should have a plan together, period, is what I think she's trying to echo. Should something become available or someone would want to come and aid us or fund us in getting these things rectified, we should have plans together for Clarendon Road, for the Leading Homes, for the flooding areas, for Whitty Lane. We should have something that addresses how and, you know, what agencies need to participate in getting those areas corrected on paper, that we could just modify accordingly should things change. So we'll try to work on that. I'll be in contact with Allison about that also. We still don't have enough for quorum, so we'll still have to pass on the meeting minutes to next month. And is there any other new business? Anybody? Anybody got any events?
Yes, I have a
Name?
question.
Sure.
Tommy?
Yes?
Yes. I've been talking to some of the residents, and they're very fearful about these new buildings going up all over the area.
Mm-hmm.
They're being left out. And I explained to them, most of these buildings, they're luxury. I think the one on Church and Rogers is finished.
You're saying that most of the buildings that are going in, they're able to have a luxury component?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I mean, it's hard because there aren't really provisions to prevent that. The tax incentive thing is gone, so, I mean, or these are probably filled when those tax incentives were there.
Yes.
So it's something we have to speak to, but the only thing that's gonna, yeah, I mean,
Looking at it, what about this? I said, I got a meeting tonight, I'll ask the question to see what's said, but I don't believe we have any senior buildings going up. Or any low-income buildings at all.
we have some activity that's happening on Utica Avenue. I'm sure everybody's seen it from Monodoc. On Monodoc, I think that those are supposed to be senior housing. Not to diminish what you're saying, but we do have some state funded projects that are going on in the neighborhood. You've seen the activities, you've seen the irregular sized buildings on Utica with the cranes. And those were proposals that they put in place from last year and they're executing on now. Again, those are state funded projects. That, and then we have to observe what's going on with Vital Brooklyn also.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be probably ramping up at the top of the year or some version of it. So we have to keep our eyes on these things, even though technically most of it is on our borders. We do need to pay attention to what's coming.
I see some activity going on in the old Riley building. That's on, I believe, Albany and Church.
I'm sorry?
You know what's going on with the old Riley building on Church Avenue?
The Rite Aid building, you said?
The old one.
Oh, no, Church in Albany you're talking about?
Yes.
I looked up the permits for that and no ownership change, no activity as far as I know. I don't know if they're using it to store materials, but as far as I know, there is no active.
It's all fixed up. They have construction going on inside. And I'm watching it, and I'm trying to figure out, I wonder what they're going to put there.
Yeah, I haven't.
They put a grocery store there.
I'll do another permit search, but maybe they have a demolition thing going on. But as far as I know, I didn't see anything filed the last time I looked, which was October for November's meeting.
Yeah, I think they're finished with demolition. Looks like they're in their plastering and sheetrock.
They definitely repainted the exterior of that place.
Yes.
They painted it so that the Rite Aid insignias were gone, or did they paint it like a green color to like?
White, it's like a white gray.
It's like gray or something, light gray.
Very light gray. And I thought,
All right, I'm gonna have to drive by them. Did anybody notice any permits? Visual permits or anything like that? No?
I'm working. They're sheetrocking and cleaning.
Not yet.
Okay, all right.
I have a question.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question.
Sorry. My hand was up.
Yeah, I'm not sure who asked the question.
I was asking a question.
Sure.
I'll wait.
Okay,
thank
you. Oh, please go ahead. I'll go after you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
So, I noticed on the corner of Bedford and Cotillo, there was a house plus several buildings or home that was knocked down. Do you
Mhm.
know what's the plan for that? I think it was 3 or 4 different houses that was knocked down.
Bedford and Cortello.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
it
have to
was a
look up.
house on the corner, and then
Yeah, no, I'm
Yes.
visualizing it in my head now. I know what you're
Yes.
talking
And
about.
like several homes, I think. It's
I
like
can also
2402, 2404, 2406, I think, and
That
maybe
was
8.
you sent the email about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. All right, all right, all right. Yeah, I was
Okay.
just looking for that email. I'll follow up with you with that. And I'll try to
Okay.
see
Thank you.
if I can canvas.
Yeah, if I may, this is Melanie here. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Just for your reference, because I actually live around the block from it, it's something I've been keeping a close eye on. So there's no leasing or status change at this time. The demolition, as you know, was completed. It was for 2 houses that were attached to each other. The ownership, I believe, the owner, the landlord, was caught up in litigation for, basically abandoning the property. So certainly I'm happy to help assist with Sheriff Ray to keep posted on the development of that property, although I would forewarn now, given the recent developments in the area, that there certainly will be a new beacon that likely goes up in its place and blocks out more sunlight and clouds once it is finally released.
Yeah, I'll get with you and I'll respond to that email and we'll speak. But I'm hoping that tonight with the Zola map that you could kind of get an idea of what the potentials were. And I was speaking to that email in my mind, which is why I kind of went that way. But I'll be
Okay.
in communication with you just to give you like a one-on-one of what the
Okay.
potentials could be. Because unless it's formed, then those architect plans go out and the city approves it. It's going to be hard to know what's coming. But if you're seeing, attached homes get demolished and an entire lot go out, the first thing you may see is provisions to have those lots combined or not. And that may lead into what's going on. In order to do that, they might need to submit plans, which is what usually gets exposed and what gets distributed to YIMBY and all those other sites that track that information on a normal basis, right?
Wow. Yes,
But
oversaturated because we have I could see the Sears building down my block, which I know it doesn't have anything to do with 17. So just to add more, there you go. Thank you.
no problem. But I'll be in contact.
Just tell you,
Mr.
the
Chair,
Sears
sorry,
building does
okay,
have
to-
to do with CB17, so we should not be ignoring that. There's a part of that project is in CB17.
The project where the Sears parking lot is, which is up actually, I think like 6 stories now.
Yes, the side that used to be the tire shop,
Repair
Right.
shop.
Sears,
Yeah.
that is
Right.
part of CB17. And
Okay.
there's housing there that we should be, advocating for, affordable housing.
With regard to the comment made earlier about, the cost of housing, just to let you know, it was documented that the third highest, most expensive developments in the entire city, factory in Manhattan as well, took place in CB17. So clearly the developments that are taking place in CB17, with the exception that was mentioned a while ago on Utica Avenue, most of the developments taking place in CB17 are not affordable housing. They're not designed, I guess, for the average resident of CB17. At the beginning of the meeting, Chair Affrey made mention of the fact that the amount of development that took place in our community in 2024 was lower, and that's not by chance. Many developers paused their development because they expected to get more bang for their money with the passage of City of Yes. They'll be able to build more, and so there was a reduction. So now with the passage of City of Yes, they're going to now explore and see what they need to do. Earlier this evening, you saw a zone of the district. I'm talking specifically about R5. The R5 is for 2 to 4 family homes. Last year, I got an email from the district office. Asking me to a meeting. The meeting was with a developer who's looking to develop a multifamily building in the R5. I would just simply say to the Land Use Committee at this point of time, the day, the night that the Land Use Committee approves a zoning variance for R5, we can about forget it, because it will mean almost like the total destruction of our community. So there's never been a zoning variance given to an R5 as yet. A developer is looking to do this. It's on Linden Boulevard in Albany. I'm alerting you to it to let you know that the day we consider it, we may be told they'll put a community center, they'll do this and that, but the day that we allow developers to go into the R5 area in our community, that is it. Right now, they have free range over R6. They can do whatever they want by even coming to us. They do have to come to us for R5 for zoning variance. So I just want you to bear this in mind.
Thank you. Hazel, I don't know if that's a new hand, old hand?
That's
Allison?
a new hand.
Okay,
This is
okay.
Hazel. I want to, want to know what are you going to do about the, I forgot, go to Allison, I'll come back to my question.
All right, no problem. Ally? Sin? Sorry.
It's okay. It happens. I just was going to you had mentioned like events. This is really now a side note, but I wanted to invite CB17 residents to a Pratt student presentation that's going to occur at Rugby Library as a community report back for the projects they've been working on that deal with environmental justice issues around, lack of open space, flooding, and the like in our community. It's December 17th, Rugby Library from 6 to 7:30. And I'll make sure that it's part of our continuing work with some of the institutions of higher learning in New York City, because we work with Pratt and also Columbia on some of these projects. But I'll make sure that everyone gets an invitation so you can come out and be able to just at least engage with what some students have contemplated as could be some solutions to some of the problems that we're facing. So
Thank you.
Could
you share that in the group chat and send me that?
I will.
Flyer if you have one. All right. Thank you.
It's Hazel. Okay.
Thank you.
What I wanted to ask about, now that the city of Yes has passed, how is it going to affect our decisions on the property Nostrand and Farragut?
We're talking about
Medical center.
3005, the medical center?
The medical
Yes.
center.
Yeah. How does that affect that?
They basically don't have to come here.
Yeah, there was something about the parking.
The parking restriction may be reduced, right? So provisionally, I think they needed 24 spots. The last time they came to us, they achieved 24 spots. They needed like 40 or something like that.
45.
Yeah,
45.
45 spots. So this speaks to the reduction, what that reduction language means, right?
Yeah.
I'm just sorry if you see me looking down. I'm trying to remember the map and trying to see if it actually ends up in a TOD, not transit orientated district, but town centered. It might be town centered because of what happened across the street from it. I have to take another look at that corner. And yeah, this provision passed is going to make us have to take a lot of look at a few corners in the district.
Because Daniel said something about us being excluded from the elimination of parking requirements.
Not excluded, but I think that we're mostly, until we know the map, we won't know for sure. I would say that we're probably in consideration of being a combination of definitely zone 2 and 3, which is a reduction, and then 3 is a complete elimination.
Right.
I don't feel like we got the complete elimination. I feel like
See,
just from
Daniel
speaking
said
on it
that.
for yeah.
Daniel made it seem like 3, but I think when they do the overlay of that map, we're probably going to be a mix of 2 and
2 and
3.
3, yeah. That's how it was told to me in the discussions because they've been speaking on it for weeks now. But no one could ever provide a map. But I agree with the language. There would be areas in the easternmost part of the district that would probably end up being 3s, and
Mhm.
probably more towards our transit zone being 2s. So
Yeah.
it's going to be something that we're going to have to observe. Maybe we should probably even try to get somebody to analyze what the
Because
potential could be, because I could
because
see a lot of things changing, like 3005 Farragut Road. That could be something that could technically trigger a town centered thing, which would give them higher height, right? But it's not housing. It's a
no,
commercial
yeah.
R6, right? So
But they were
yeah.
waiting for that because in part of their presentation, the second time, they had a City of Yes portion.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could say plainly that they kind of alluded to the fact that they would probably get it anyway should the City of Yes pass in that form, but it's not that form.
Right.
So I don't know how I have to go review that to see how it is. But we all know as a committee that the last provision, they put those on the same parking level, they put those stackable car things and went from 8 spots to 24. But I don't think that they got what they were looking for or needed, because I think the parking mandates and the reductions are only applying to housing, right? So I'm not sure if it would apply to them, but you never know. You never know because it could be tethered to the actual district or what they're classified as. And I think they were R6, R5. They were R5, right? R5. But they have like
That's an R6 area.
is it an R6? Yeah, I think they have an R6, but they also have like a C1 or C13 across the street
Yeah,
or
they have
something
a
like that.
commercial, yeah.
Yeah, that's across the street from each other. So I have to see how that looks. I think we all gonna have to see how the neighborhood could potentially change, especially towards the transit corridors with the 2 things, because it can be overlaid with each other. A stop like Beverly Road on the 2 train, I know has that grocery store that's 1 level. And every time I go by there, I always say that technically that could be a town centered and a transit orientated zone in one aspect. It triggers both. It could actually become as high as the buildings next to it, or potentially go higher because it's across the street from the train station, you know? And it's on a shorter block, and it could potentially happen. Like that grocery store could probably end up closing up and reopening with, 10-story apartments above it. When it develops and the language comes out, we'll see it. I hope that we could get a grasp on what the potentials could be. But we knew going into the plan that our district would probably be affected by the 10 points that we concentrated on. Some provisions, some restrictions are in place, but I wish we had more color to identify what it was to better prepare ourselves. I don't want to learn what the proposal looks like for us with all of the language in place without having something that gives us parameters to measure against.
What I can do, in the spring, Brooklyn Level Up will have a student studio with Columbia University grad students on development and all of that in this area. And I'm gonna ask them if we can make sure that we get some good visualizations of what the mapping looks like in context of this proposal with, what we know to be access to trains, where the flooding tends to happen and all of the impacts based on this. So I'll put that in our proposal. But in exchange for that, I would definitely want community board members to actually be active in the community engagement piece around doing interviews with students about their experience or what they know. So if we can, make sure that people are going to be, participate in like this data collection, then I could definitely make a push for us to get some good visualizations out of the exchange.
I think with the concern that we'll get participation, I could tell you from my inbox, people are paying attention to this specifically because they know that it's going to be something that's going to impact them in one way or the other. I don't think that participation will be an issue.
Okay,
I think you'll definitely
then
get
I'll
it.
move forward with it then.
All right. Let's follow. Yeah, we'll follow up. And that's what we all need, that information in order to see the map as a whole and to apply the data appropriately to each one of the proposals and see how it affects us, like a heat map of sorts. It'll help to see what's forthcoming, right? We would say that it would take probably 2 years for us to see anything actively get triggered from when this proposal gets in. I would say they don't really take too long, but the city is the city. Plus, like I mentioned before, there's a couple of other changes administratively that's happening within the city as far as permit filing, cost, and how things are going to be executed in the comings that may also affect both from a cost perspective and from a time frame perspective of how quickly they can actually execute these things. Because, for an example, if they're changing the electrical code, for instance, anybody who had plans last year, those plans aren't going to be good come June of next year. They're going to all have to be updated and amended to whatever the new provisions are for plumbing, electric, gas, etc. So administratively, the things are changing as well. And it's not a mistake that the two things were passed at the same time. It's been 14 years since the particular code that I'm speaking about has been touched. But, it passed last month for the first time. It's changed for the first time in 14 years last month. And that's going to come with a lot of pain for developers specifically. And anybody who was waiting on the sidelines with plans is going to come with pain too. So it does buy us a little bit more time to be prepared for what could be coming. And we'll follow up. Where's the link for the schools? Sorry. Link for the...
Can I just ask you about that? Is there
Sure.
any plan or move because the grid can't handle everybody shifting to electric. It can't handle the usage we have now. We have brownouts in this area to begin with. So what is the investment with Con Ed and all of that to accommodate that shift?
It's going to be, I can speak to that there. I didn't see anything that would increase grid usage other than the regular green things that they've been implementing to try to reduce stress from the grid. They and fortunately the time frame is this year. So it seems like I said in the past, it seems like everything that we're dealing with has always been in the forefront. There is like a mandate for commercial buildings, for instance, by December 31st to reduce their output or their load and change all of their lights should they be over 10,000 square feet or so to LEDs. And that's supposed to reduce the impact on the grid and then allow for some of these other things to happen. But it seems like they're not giving enough time for that to happen or something to happen otherwise. So it is an important question, how Con Edison addresses this. They haven't been very open, or they probably don't have any answers of how they're going to actually increase the grid unless it ends up being at a cost. I'm sure everybody's electric bills were a little bit higher. It's because you're probably being supplied by somebody else at this time. So what does that look like when all these provisions go through? Who ends up being a supplier then? And what's the cost impact of that? So we'll follow up. And I can say that I haven't seen anything to say that that's going to be addressed. Infrastructure is a broad term, but everything that we're seeing when you get spoken about infrastructure is leaning towards like EV cars and that type of infrastructure. But the concern from the city, from the proposal that, from the public hearing was like bridges, drainage systems, the flooding. I'll tell you the truth that electrical was probably last. I don't know if I even heard much of, if any of that. But it's the lingering issue that we all know that needs to be addressed. But how? Maybe we could do some research on that as well, But we need to talk to our partners. I'm not sure if they're going to have any understanding on that either. That might be more of a civil engineer issue. Or maybe we need to come up with a plan and do the thinking for them to address it. But it's a fair question. If you're electrifying the city in all facets, and you can't handle the electricity or the amperage usage now, how do you move forward with a plan like this without addressing those issues first? It's all fair. And Miss Robinson. Robinson?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. I see your hand is up on one, but you're on the phone. Yeah, no problem.
Yes,
All right,
sorry about
I
that.
got you. Yeah.
I'm just curious as to know, um, they say the city of Yes is a past law. So if there's a new administration taking over the city, like for instance, a new mayor, would this law still be in operation?
I would say yes.
Oh, okay.
I would say yes. I would say the administration that will handle the law and the faces of it may change, which we've experienced. But if it's on the books, it'll be followed, it'll be executed on, for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a possibility we could, I think is next year. He's running for the race for mayor's next year. Come 2026, we could have a new mayor. But his plan is on the books.
Maybe before that, because he's been indicted.
Well, you know, it's New York. I won't get into that. We got a lot of crazy things happening in New York this week. So,
We may have the new rules.
yeah.
We may want to tweak or change what the previous mayor did.
So
Depends
it's
what he's in.
I'll just conclude and say that yeah, it will be on the books as a zoning text amendment. Probably the most solid thing that you could have is something that sticks to zoning because it leaves very little wiggle room without having to go through a similar process to change it again. You know, it was slowly implemented in various facets, and we also need to look at the plan as a whole now, right? We've dealt with different segments, which we all agreed wasn't really the best thing because we have to see how the economic portion affects the housing portion, affects this portion, and we were given it in pieces, not as a whole thing. So what does the whole thing look like? Not everything is all, or this version of it is all together and the other one's half passed. What does it look like collectively? How does one thing affect the other? You know, it's a lot to concentrate and to review and to look at. So hopefully if we could get the students to give us a hand to visually show the entire plan in all its facets and layer that to show how one affects the other, it'll make a lot of sense for us moving forward. Plus there's some other things going on too. Some other like commercial and manufacturing things that outside of City of Yes, they're trying to address to bring more manufacturing jobs to our, manufacturing districts. And what does that look like? Again, our community board happens to have a slither of each one of these points or each one of these areas of this plan. In some facet were affected, with the exception of maybe a handful. And many of the plan we're exposed. So as it gets colored in, I'll share the information. And that's that. Also, Ms. Robinson, we answered. So everybody's good. Tell Conrad to start raising the bill. I wish I had that connection.
Miss Bennett has her hand up.
Does she? Oh, Ms. Bennett, sorry. Ms. Bennett? Maybe she can't unmute herself.
Yeah, I'm unsure how long she's had her hand up, but she was unmuted just before, so.
Okay. So we got the event. So hearing no other new business, any other new business? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we shift on to adjournment. Does someone make a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
Who? State your name.
Khadijah.
Khadijah motions to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I second the motion, Marguerite.
Marguerite Viglianti seconds the motion. Moved and properly seconded. The meeting's adjourned Happy holidays, everybody. Stay safe, stay warm.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Same to you.